What's up, everybody? Just want to take a quick second and let people know that I am self-supported. I now put all of my episodes on Substack for paid subscribers. I put them up early, and then 24 hours later, I release them to the public on all my platforms. I also have Venmo, PayPal, Cash App, Buy Me a Coffee, Zelle, a P.O. Box, and Locals, Patreon. And all of the links are in the show notes of every single episode I put out. So look forward to continuing to provide great conversations, and thank you all for your continued support. Michael, John, let's go a few steps back. We've already been talking about things in relation to Charlie Kirk, and for people that are listening, let's go backwards a little bit and discuss what we'll summarize what you two were talking about. And thanks for both coming back on.
Thank you, John. Would you like to start?
Sure. Yeah, pleasure. I started off talking about Charlie Kirk and with Michael, and just want to go through what my own kind of encounter with the news was. I was in a place called Ledbury in England at the time. I had two events on Wednesday and Thursday nights, and the first I heard about it halfway through the first on Wednesday, and it was a total shock, obviously, and my response was pretty, as you would expect. I think just shock and horror and a certain amount of grief that the loss of this young life and so on. And we said as much in the discussion we had.
Wait, John, let me interrupt you. John, let me interrupt you 1 second. I'm hearing a little noise in the background. Is that coming from somebody? Anybody hearing that noise? Michael?
It could be, there's could be somebody here. Yeah. Okay. I think it's okay.
Okay. We're good now?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Michael, you don't hear it? This episode is brought to you by Vaulted, launched by McIlvaney Financial Group. The simplest and most affordable way to own physical gold and silver. Physical gold is the only asset outside of the control of the government and banking system. They can print dollars, but they can't print gold. Click on the promo link in the show notes or go to vaulted.blbvux.net/coffeeandamike. No, I think we're good. Okay. I was
stop?
Yeah. If it continues again, I'll let you know. I'm sorry, but go ahead.
We've got a creaky floor. My wife is around the.
Okay.
We've got a creaky.
So maybe that's what I'm hearing, because it's coming through. So okay, go ahead though, John.
You want to start again?
No, it's okay. Go ahead.
Oh.
Yeah,
okay.
But go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. On the second night, then just before we started, I was talking to some people, and one of them mentioned that there was this what they were calling a conspiracy theory now emerging about the Charlie Kirk thing, and that it might be a staged event or a false flag or something along those lines. And I mean, to be honest, my initial response to that, kind of born of my kind of general sense that there's a danger in all that stuff, that it's kind of a hobbyism that goes on sometimes in the wake of events on the internet, that people start to immediately tear things apart and throw out details that don't seem to cohere. And I kind of was thinking about that, but what I kind of said was, when I spoke about it very briefly on the night, was that, this is a real danger. And I don't necessarily mean to criticize or to condemn the tendency to hypothesize about these things at all, but simply to observe that there's a kind of consequence of this, which in this instance may well be being played by the orchestrators of this, whereby the downstream effect of it is to kind of disintegrate and unravel the possibility of agreed meanings, among the public about what's happened, and to fracture any sense of, cohesion or coherence, and moreover to undermine people's belief, not alone in the authorities and the facts and so on, but in their own capacity to apprehend information, to their own feelings about it, so that they have this immediate response, as I had, to that appalling shot of the bullet entering Charlie Kirk, and and the spurting of blood and that, which really just absolutely paralyzed me. And yet, you then have to say, oh, maybe am I being played? That kind of thing. Now, I hadn't at that time had time to investigate it in any way. I was out in a foreign country and just had my phone, so I wasn't really following anything. But when I came back, I started to look into it a little bit, and I had to kind of concede that there's something very weird going on here. It's not a normal thing, and there's so many aspects of it that are problematic. I'll just mention a few. That there's these two guys behind Charlie Kirk just before he's being shot. One of them's wearing a white baseball cap, and he tips it at a certain moment. And there's another guy behind him, which makes some kind of beside him. He makes a strange kind of signal with his arms, where he kind of does something like this, and immediately the shot comes, and then somebody in the crowd is seen to go, make a kind of a jubilant kind of signal, and all this. Now, I'm not suggesting that I'm sort of some great sleuth in seeing these things. Quite the contrary. What I'm saying is that these things are done in such a blatant way that they can only have been intended to be seen, to be noticed, and to be remarked on, and to feed into the whatever discussion would happen. So, in other words, it's almost as if the people who orchestrated this wanted the conspiracy to evolve about it, multiple conspiracies, which, because at the end of the day, it's almost that the longer you go on with this, you can actually end up with a situation where virtually, theoretically anyway, every single person in the world will have a slightly different theory about what happened, but nobody will be 100% sure that theirs is where theirs is in relation to the actual truth. But or that there'll be no sense of agreement or of concurrence or anything like that. It'll be almost you'll be afraid to mention it, particularly in the present climate. And there are other aspects as well, which I'm kind of loath to mention them, but there's some oddities about, the scene which is put out of Charlie Kirk's wife speaking to his dead body in the casket, which I found very strange and not very unusual, let's say. And the tone of it just didn't seem to be right. It didn't seem to be what would happen in such a situation. I could be wrong about that because, of course, in these situations, we all know I think, from our own experiences of grief, that you behave very oddly in a situation like where grief is suddenly pushed upon you. So that's kind of, so I suppose I'm talking really about the kind of idea of that you can actually unravel a culture by pummeling it with different versions of the same apparent narrative. And in the end, the result will be a complete demoralization of the public in general and no sense afterwards of what actually happened. So that in the end, you will not be able to use the term the assassination of Charlie Kirk without actually hesitating before the word has assassination, even if you fully believe that it actually happened as it seemed to happen.
Michael?
Right. I mean, I agree, except that the way that he put it was more in depth than what we usually hear. John, that was really interesting.
Here, Michael, do me a favor. I'm going to interrupt you a second. Your mic is down. Can you turn your mic up a little bit?
Mine is down. My mic is down.
Your volume. No, I'm sorry, your volume.
I'm sorry. Let's see. Here we go. I might be able to. How about that?
There we go. There we go. No, you're good.
Okay. Sorry. Sorry about that. Yeah, I mean, the way that John just explained it was really interesting and valuable because, the intentional confusion that's quite obvious. I mean, the only people that are going to try to cause confusion for us are definite enemies. In a moment when we need clarity and they're trying to confuse us, whoever they are, like law enforcement continuously. Let's go back to the last Trump, quote unquote, assassination attempt. I mean, the bullet shot was transparently nonsense. I mean, the bullet trace. I mean, the photo with the bullet trace. Let me see here. Which camera is this here? See, this is a Sony Alpha 1. You see this? This is the camera that photographer was using. I use the same camera. This is a different lens, but I have the same lens as well. I mean, I've done so much combat photography that even I can't remember. You know what I mean? Thousands of photos in actual combat, and I've never seen a photo like that. And I've never seen any combat photographer or police photographer or any other photographer who's ever captured a photo like that in any war. And any photo that, I'm talking about that bullet trace, that, the little streak that got the Pulitzer Prize. I think it got a Pulitzer, by Trump on Trump Day. That's clear nonsense, that photo, right? And again, the law enforcement cleaned up the evidence immediately, hosed off the roof where the alleged shooter was, and took down the stands and everything else. They dismantled the entire crime scene. Obviously, they were covering up, obviously, right in front of everybody, right? And yet, when you say, "Hey, these things were wrong," people go, "Oh, you're saying the assassination was faked or whatever." Here's the bottom line: if somebody's trying to confuse us, they're not our friends, and they're trying to hurt us. And then we go to this one. There's so much confusion, and it's obviously intentional, like John said. So whatever they're up to is malicious. And this isn't the end of it. I mean, this sort of October 7th, it was very similar with the attack there near Gaza. That was a clear staked goat attack, as you've heard Matt Bracken and you've talked about before. That was a clear green flag staked goat attack. So, I mean, this is what they habitually do, whether it's the USS Liberty or actually rewind back to World War II. The United States did a clear staked goat attack with our with our fleet at Pearl Harbor, left it there, knowing the Japanese were going to attack. It wasn't theoretical. We knew it. It was on the headline of the newspaper 7 days in advance, 7 days before the attack on Pearl Harbor, 7 days. It was headline news. Japanese may attack over the weekend, and the Honolulu Advertiser, right? I first published that like 10 years ago, right? And people said, "Oh, that's a great Photoshop you got there." I'm like, "Nope, Rambo, ceasefire. It's legit. Go down to the microfiche in Honolulu and look it up yourself, right? You can find it. It's online now, right?" So at the end of the day, that itself was a staked goat attack. Staked goat is when you stake a goat so that like a wolf will get it, so you can kill the wolf, right? Down in the Darien Gap where I go so often, I came into a village a couple of years ago, and there was a new jaguar skull up in a hut, right? And it was fresh. And I asked who killed it. Obviously, a very close shotgun shot, very tight. And I said, "Whoa, somebody was really close to this thing when they got it." And I asked the Imbra Indian how he got that jaguar. And how did he do it? He staked a pig next to the river. And on a moonless night, because they like to hunt on a moonless night, he just stayed in the water. And then when the jaguar came out to get the pig, he turned his light on and shot it, right? And so what I'm getting to is this is a normal hunting technique. It's a normal war technique, and it's used by the United States and by Zionists on a regular basis, right? And what just happened with Charlie Kirk, I don't know. But what I can say is this: he clearly was buoyed by Zionist money. He didn't build that giant company by himself from scratch since he was 18. It's openly that he was built up to sell the story that the Zionists wanted to hear about Israel and that sort of thing in Iran. And at some point, he started to go off the reservation. Charlie Kirk started to go off the reservation, and he started to almost maybe like Pinocchio, who wanted to become his own boy, right? And so he, and this often happens, by the way, when it comes to counterintelligence operations, when somebody is built up to a certain size or a certain, let's say, ego structure, and they're like, "Hey, I'm my own man. You know what I mean? I can run this show," right? And the person that's being used kind of goes off the reservation. That's common. That's a common thing, right? And I think that's what happened with Charlie. That's what it appears that he just got his own power under him, and his own huge, significant young people base was upset. A lot of the people were upset about what's happening in Gaza. It's a clear genocide. They were upset about the attack on Iran, and they're upset about other things. And Charlie, I don't know if he was responding to that because I can't read his mind, but what we can do is read the timelines, and we can, see a few things. He started to change his tune. He started to say, hey, the October 7th, something was wrong with that. He clearly stated that in clear terms. He clearly said that what's going on in Gaza is wrong, clearly said the Iran attacks were wrong. And, obviously he's off the plantation at that point. Now, keep in mind, he has Israel is in trouble. They're in serious trouble because Israel is losing American support base. For instance, people like me who supported Israel most of my life shifted over time to neutral. And then when it came time for the death jab and seeing the things that they did, that's it. I'm no longer not even neutral at this point. I'm speaking out. This is obvious, right? And the October 7th, that was obvious stake to go to attack. And so, at some point you just like, hey, that's enough. And that's happening with a lot of people in our generation. We're tired of them, right? People that used to support them no longer see them as our great ally. We see them actually as a menace to society and a menace to the United States, right? And that is very dangerous to them. And Charlie Kirk has been their last hope, it appears, in making that younger generation coalesce, in Judeo-Christianity, as they are always saying, and basically imbuing the young people of America, or many of them anyway, with the idea that they have some obligation to give a kidney and a liver and another kidney for Israel, right? So Charlie Kirk was very effective at getting young people involved to support Israel, and then he started to go off the reservation, which obviously, I mean, that's a proximate danger to Israel, because not only is he not neutral now, he's actually using the force that they put under him and the platform and the huge access. He's actually undermining their mission. So at this point, they got to make a choice. This guy, Charlie Kirk, could be running for president in the next 4 or 5 years when he's, 35, that sort of thing, right? I mean, seriously. And then what? They had to make a choice. I think that's my gut instinct, is what I'm telling you. It's not obviously. Go ahead, sir.
No. Finish your thought. But I didn't have to stop. But what I wanted to add to that, and Michael, and this is where I agree with you, because first of all, he was a politician for all intents purposes, right? I mean, definitely the manner in which he carried himself, the manner and his appearances, he was very, very smart, very intellectual. And he was running around. His circle was Donald Trump, Donald Trump's kids, J.D. Vance, Peter Thiel. I mean, he was in the inner circle. And Turning Point and Turning Point Action, which is a sister company, they had started their on-the-ground campaign, I think it was last year, Turning Point Action, where he delivered the young people, which I'm assuming mostly boys, to vote for Trump. Usually they don't vote, or they vote Democratic if they do. He was successful in achieving that objective. So now you take him out, he's gone. The Turning Point has been neutralized. I mean, I know they're going to they're going to go on, but how can they do that without their leader as effective as they were? So, that's where it begs me to ask that question. All right, who benefits from this? Israel, potentially, Democrats, Republicans, establishment Republicans? Because the young people next year into the midterms, how are they going to feel? Are they going to be completely demoralized from it?
John?
Yeah, I think that sounds a very plausible scenario that you're putting forward there, Michael. I'm not sure about. I'm just running through my head, the permutations and the pieces, the fragments that I've been paying attention to, that I've heard that are sort of problematic. Like, for example, the fact that that after the shooting he was taken away, not in an ambulance but in a car, and there was then some kind of thing about a plane taking off and so on. Now, you see, that implies that it's all fake completely, that he wasn't shot or something. So this opens up a whole other front. But actually, that could be just misdirection as well. I mean, so that what I'm saying is that there's such a fragmentation of meanings in all of this, that there are multiple meanings. Immediately off the top of your head, you could come up with 5 or 6 different options, permutations for what actually went down. That he was shot dead. He wasn't shot. It wasn't him. There was never Charlie Kirk or whatever. This kind of stuff, and this is going rife all over the place now. And that ultimately, so they get two birds with one stone, perhaps. That they take out this guy who was there such a danger to them and had, in their view, betrayed him, and then they create massive confusion in the public, which is exactly what this whole project that we're talking about overall, going back to COVID and behind, that's what that thrives on. People's confusion and the sense that I can't possibly say what's real. I can't possibly say what's true. I have no opinion. I don't speak about anything anymore. And so you add to it the kind of what I call the mutism that is affecting so many of our populations, that people are afraid even to think a thought in the company of others, lest it be read.
Well, yeah. And it, you can't kill the signal, but you can turn up the noise, like my friend Dave Collum likes to reference. And
yes,
and that's where I'm having a hard time with the idea of the rifle. And I probably should have checked this before coming on, but what was encrypted? Was it in the rifle or in the bullets?
The bullets.
Yeah, the bullets. Like now we're getting into this whole Jack Ryan, Harrison Ford, Patriot Games movie scenario. And look, maybe all this is true. Maybe everything that they're saying in the mainstream media is, this is the story. I just have a hard time with that.
I think one of the things, Misako and I were just talking about this yesterday, that at some point when you just realize, hey, they're trying to trick me and I'm not going to be able to figure out all the things that they did. I'm just not going to be able to figure them out with any certainty. I shouldn't waste my brainwaves on that, on what the magician, when did he actually do his hand? How did he make the mask work? You know what I mean? And then start to just focus on, they're trying to fool me. They're the enemy, right? They're the enemy, because only your enemy would do that. So then that changes the way you look at the whole situation, where, instead of trying to figure out exactly when he got the rabbit out of the hat, we're just like, hey, this whole thing is rigged and that's it. Then you're not actually confused anymore, because you're not trying to figure out when how did he actually get that rabbit out of that hat. You're just like, hey, the guy's a fraud. In fact, the whole house is a fraud, right? It's not just him, it's the whole thing that we're in, right? It's the whole ecosystem, because they're intentionally trying to put us off balance and make us confused so that they can continue with the next big thing. And while we keep looking at the mouse running across the road, bam, another truck hits us, right? There's all kinds of other things going on with our food supply. There's obviously they're trying to use this distraction to put other things into effect that that nobody's paying attention to. Like 9/11 was coming up, right? They didn't want us looking at 9/11, because increasingly people are realizing that, hey, that looks like Zionists too, right? I mean, increasingly, I think a lot of people have changed their tune on that, on 9/11. True or not true, there's been so much bullshit that they've done that's overt, like October 7th, right? That was clear, and that Trump bullet trace and so many, the death jab, right? Anybody that pushed the death jab the way that they've done, they're clearly committing genocide, right? There is zero that they won't do. There's zero that's off limits. We don't owe them any benefit of the doubt. People are owed the benefit of the doubt when you're, a normal situation, but we're in a wartime situation, and we know that they're killing as many of us as they possibly can. We're not obligated to sort out every little thing on how we can assign who did what to whom. At the end of the day, it looks like Zionists killed Charlie Kirk, right? We don't have time to collect all the evidence and go through it and be uncertain. And 10 years later, we haven't quite figured it out. This is war. You have to be quick. You have to make intuitive decisions and make your judgment and move to the next thing, right? And in my judgment, the Zionists just killed him. That's what I think. And I'm not going to spend 3 months going through the evidence, because I'm always going to be fooled and uncertain about it. We have to make quick decisions.
I agree, Michael. I'm just wondering, to broaden out a bit, what's your sense from you've been going around the place for a long time, and when you must have probably have a different sense of than the ordinary person of what kind of undertows are out there. I have a sense that we're approaching some kind of denouement, at least some escalation in events, whether it's a war, whether it's this story about France and Russia, whether it's, of course, the CBDCs are imminent as well, all of these things. What's your sense of the moment now? Because I mean, you've said before, and I think rightly, and we all have this difficulty, that timings are very difficult to predict, and that you kind of we're always going to get them wrong. I mean, lots of us have stores of tin food which are kind of near their sell by dates now, if not by their use by. So where do you feel we are now?
Well, again, like you just mentioned, timing is difficult, but it's very clear that conditions continue to accrue. We're actually in a state of war. That's obvious. It's just not obvious to everybody. Because a lot of people don't realize that, for instance, the war has so many faces, like the death jab is part of the war. The invasions over our borders, like you see all around you in Dublin, we've been there looking at it ourselves. That's part of it, right? Food prices continue to go up, of course, and energy supply continues to become more and more threatened. I mean, there's so many aspects of this, race hatred that's been stoked, all the sorts of forms of hatred that we've all seen with our own eyes, whether it's men against women or young people against old people, that whatever, right? The conditions, there's clearly that people that want us to go into war, and they're successfully moving the ball down the road still. I think some people think that, the death of Charlie Kirk or whatever happened to him would, like you mentioned earlier, we don't even know if that's, we don't know what happened. But obviously that hasn't sparked mass violence in the streets. But, at any moment something could happen, and there you go. You just never know. We could wake up in the morning and, cities are burning or not. We just don't know. But sooner or later, clearly, I think we're going to end up in food problems. And food problems, you're Irish, you know what that can do. I mean, that's quite significant, to put it mildly. Your population never recovered from the famine that ended in the early 1850s. So it's still not recovered. And that's 170 years ago, 175 years ago, right?
Yes.
So, I mean, it's very significant.
Yes. There's been a lot of talk. I mean, we had our first conversation on these themes over 14 months ago, and then another one about a year ago, and that was the first, I think, that this was talked about on this side of the water anyway. But recently, now in the last 6 months, there's been a lot of talk about the idea of in the UK, civil war, and there's a guy called Professor David Betts from King's College London, who's been talking a lot about this and various aspects of it. And he's going through, he works from a different point of view to you, where you're out on the ground talking to people. He looks at the history of these things, and he says the signs are very ominous. He too doesn't, put his pin on a clock and say this is when it's going to happen, but at the same time, he seems to be suggesting that it's very, very imminent, that we're close to the tipping point.
Yeah, history. I spend a lot of time in history books. Great, you should see my library. And it's like, to learn what's going on, you have to spend a lot of time with your nose in the books. And it's very, very helpful to actually go places with key people and spend significant time and do things actually. And then actually starting to teach. That's like the epitome when you really start, as you well know, when you start to actually teach. That's when you really start to learn, because everybody finds where the holes are in your knowledge, right? And then you have to plug those up through more study. But studying the history of these things, that's absolutely key. I mean, there's no way to be good at war prediction without spending huge amounts of time just studying stuff from centuries ago. And then these patterns eventually, after you've studied enough, they start to become quite clear. And it takes a time. It's not like you can, within 6 months, get your balance on the bicycle. It takes longer than that. But eventually you do. And you get to the point where you're like, yep, I think it's pretty clear we're going to have famines. The question is when. Are we going to have wars? Obviously. I mean, that's clear. I mean, that's a lot of us have been saying that for years. Some people have been saying that since we were little kids. And a lot of the reasons, like G. Edward Griffin, who called me recently, that he was. I got one of his books right here, The Creature from Jekyll Island. I mean, this guy, he was saying it a long time ago, and you can see his black and white films on YouTube, G. Edward Griffin, and some of the stuff that he was predicting back then. It still hasn't fully happened, but it's clearly happening. It's clearly unfolding, and in the way that he described. And so, that was how long ago? 60, 50 years or something? 60
Yeah,
years?
yeah, 60 years. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Um, we're here. We're talking on Sunday. So this is the 14th of September, and yesterday in London there was a massive demonstration. Uh, the official figures give it 110,000, which is utterly laughable. That's the media version. The people are saying there's at least 2 to 3 million people there, and you can see the drone shots from above. Like there's vast numbers of people stretching right across the river and beyond, and what I'm wondering about, do you attach any significance to the idea that, this kind of, I suppose you could almost call it a cliche that's been bandied around for about the awakening of the people? There seems to be some movement, but is it any use, Michael, in the context of what we face, that people are now beginning to mobilize and, maybe confront those who have been doing these things in so blatantly in plain sight?
At the end of the day, if we don't treat the symptoms but actually treat the causes, it's actually not that complicated, right? There are specific people that are doing this, and they're not large in numbers. I mean, it's just a matter of addressing those situations and, taking that off the table. They're taking us off the table with death jabs and everything else. So, I mean, at the end of the day, it comes down to treating the cause and not the symptoms. And, for instance, the invasions that have happened in Ireland and so many other places, that's not organic. That's United Nations and HIAS, which is the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, Catholic Charities, Lutheran Services, all these guys. We see them all the time. But they still are just mechanisms under other people's control, right? They're still, I mean, you have to go to the actual people that are doing this. And furthermore, the foundations, and I mean foundations, financial foundations, those are the organizational structures behind this. Some of these things are centuries old, right? I mean, a lot of what we're looking at, that's why a lot of people can't see it, because they think a lot of Americans still say things like, well, this started under Obama. I'm like, this started before your grandfather was born, right? That's why you can't see it, because it is in front of us, but you can't see it because it was mature before we were born. And now we're just watching it still blossom, and we haven't chopped that tree down, right? It's a poison ivy tree. And but once we just identify it and take that thing out, then life can go on. I mean, we have to get rid of things like the Fed. There's all kinds of things that have been done that have undermined. We got like Japan and the United States. These are both very rich countries filled with poor people. I spent a lot of time in Japan and the United States. Both countries are extremely rich and filled with poor people. And both countries have open borders. And the U.S. borders are still open, by the way. In fact, we had dinner tonight with a guy that just came back from the United States because he can't get a job he's a computer programmer. He can't get a job in the United States now because Indians just took his job. So he's back here to get a job. Yeah. I mean, we just literally an hour and a half ago, we're having dinner with him. I mean, can you imagine? That was Texas.
One of the things David Betts says, and I think you would agree with it, is that there is no political solution to this. The reason he offers for that is not so much that potentially there isn't, or theoretically there isn't, but that there is no political will among the political establishments of the West to do the things that are necessary to avoid what is coming. and that therefore it becomes inevitable. That's what his basic thesis is. Would you agree with that?
I would, and I mean, and also over a period of time, the governments are captured. There's just sufficiently captured. A sufficient number of traitors are in there, or people that'll just kick the can down the road. I mean, how many disasters happened or finally occurred because somebody said, well, we'll fix it tomorrow, or you know, I don't want to rock the boat. I mean, I wonder how many disasters have happened in military commands because somebody said, "Don't rock the boat," you know, and before you know it, the boat is at the bottom of the sea, right? And that's,
Yes.
you know, and you see that when you're in the military. By the way, you get a lot of people saying, "Mine is not to know the reason why, but to do or die." You know what I mean? Basically, they're just
Yes.
being good little robots, good little gears in the machine, and getting their paycheck, and they don't really understand what the machine is doing, that they're in, that they're doing their job or they're not doing their job. But at the end of the day, like the Border Patrol, I've been across the entire U.S. southern border. I've seen our National Guard and our Border Patrol load up thousands of people onto the invasion buses, thousands, right? Right in front of me, very close, like touching close, that close, right? Thousands. And that's our Border Patrol and our National Guard doing it, invading us. And then if you ask them, how's this happening? They're like, oh, it's the Mexican cartels. I'm like, do you work for the Mexican cartel? Because you're the one doing it. I mean, you are doing it. Yeah, well, I'll lose my paycheck. You know, I won't get, you know what I mean? I'm like, well, there
Yeah.
you go. You're an ordinary man. You know, like the World War II book, Ordinary Men, right? You know, you're just doing what you're told, sir. Just doing, taking orders, right? Destroying
Yeah.
your own country.
And that brings us a little bit closer to the concept of Donald Trump, President Trump. And I mean, I know you've been very consistent on your line on Trump, and I possibly was kind of pushing back a bit that against that because I had a residual kind of belief in him based on his kind of physical demeanor and the fact that it seemed to be whatever else, whatever what his background, the facts of his history and so on, that had this kind of sense of sincerity about him in the face of his own followers, let's say. That it didn't seem to me to be an option that he would betray them. But since he's come in, I've begun to wonder that I think you're probably much closer to the truth about this than I am, or you have been, Michael. I mean, I was immediately dismayed with the second day of his office when he brought in those tech bros into the White House and started talking about, mRNA cures and AI and so on. And that was very dismaying. And of course, the warp speed thing is there still, and he has been beginning to try to deal with that. It seems to me. Last week he made a statement which was something like about Pfizer that he thought Pfizer should do more to explain to the public that their medicines are beneficial because they're telling him this, but they don't seem to be telling anybody else. And he goes on to say that Bobby Kennedy isn't happy, and he wants Bobby to be happy and he wants to kind of get this dealt with. So it sounded a little bit disingenuous on one side, but also trying to kind of, as it were, move the juggernaut around to turn it around and get it facing back the other direction. What is your fundamental sense of Trump? Is he just a stooge for the Zionists? Is he the enemy of the American people, like, or what?
Ah, he's a fraud. I mean, he has been. Back before the first election, Newt Gingrich, former Speaker of the House, called me up. He was trying to gin up support for Trump, and I'm like, I'm not going to vote for Clinton or any of those people, but don't you have somebody better than Trump? I mean, just seriously, uh, but because the thing is you can spot people that are very similar to you, and you can spot your opposite very clearly. Like I can spot people that are the people that are kind of in between. Can be hard to read them, but the people that are very similar to you, you can kind of read their mind. Somewhat. You're not really reading their mind. You're just similar. But with Trump, he's like my polar opposite. So it's easy for me to predict what he is going to do, and I've been incredibly accurate. You know how I do it is I imagine what I would do, and I say he'll do the polar opposite, and he does. He does. I mean, it's like it's very pretty. I'm not reading his mind. I'm reading mine and taking the opposite, like
Yeah.
like pushing the death jab. Fauci didn't fool him. He's not that stupid. He's a smart guy. He's reasonably smart, but he's incredibly corrupt and he's a mass murderer. I mean, it's crystal clear. He murders his own supporters, straight up, in mass, and laughs about it. Pushes McDonald's, Diet Coke, marijuana, all that, right? He doesn't care. He doesn't care about anybody. He is a cult of one, which is a narcissist, right? And he's like his own little cult. But on the Pushka dolls, he's the tiny little cult, the tiny little center part of Trump is a deeply narcissistic guy, right? The next level is whoever's got a lot of power that benefits him. If it were Catholics, he would be Catholic. If it were Hindus, he would be like a Vishnite or a Shivite or something, right? If it were Buddhist, he would be wearing orange, right? But it happens to be Zionist, so he's playing Zionist, right? I mean, he's playing. He's just a narcissist doing narcissist stuff. And if you try to imagine what somebody like that would do and just experiment with that paradigm, you're going to see it's incredibly predictive of Trump. You still have to pay attention to the information to get, as clean of information as you can get. And then you'll see, you plug that into that paradigm and you'll see Trump is not going. Look at the things that I said before he was in office this time. If he doesn't defund the United Nations, IOM, highest, and all these people, then he's not serious about getting all these people out of our country. He's just not. And he hasn't gone after the United Nations or any of those guys. They're still perfectly in place. The architectures are all in place. And he's not doing any mass deportations. He's doing some perfunctory show stuff, but he's just not doing it. It's not in evidence, and it's not happening. It's just happening enough for some photo ops. The guy's a traitor. He's a straight up hardcore traitor.
Can I add to that? Can I add to that really quick in regards to the deportations? Because if they really wanted to make an impact, why not go after the landlords that are housing these people and go after some of the employers? Because once that were to occur, you would have a ripple effect of the employers saying, "All right, you can't work for me anymore. You can't live here anymore." That would echo across the country so fast, but yet they send in ICE agents into LA into a garment district, like where that's going to be a heavily a lot of migrants and illegals are there. So, like, to Michael's point, I don't know. I mean, I feel like what I said would be more viable, and you'd see a quicker turnaround, but they're not doing any of that.
Yeah, like I said, Masako and I tonight, just hour and a half, 2 hours ago, we had dinner with somebody who literally just came in from Texas, a computer programmer, and he lost his job to Indians. So he's over here looking for a job. I mean, straight up, hardcore, And how many stories are there like that? Indians are moving to Texas and Canada and whatnot, and Trump's giving the visas out. He's straight up taking jobs from Americans, and now they're not coming over the border at midnight. They're coming over on scheduled flights.
And then
what?
I just want to. I wanted to go back to Big Pharma here for a second in regards to Kennedy, because, and John, this would be a good question for you, being that you're and Michael, but start with John. Being in Europe and Ireland, because I had said, to your point, Larry Ellison from Oracle was in the White House right as the new administration had come in, talking about these new solutions and shots and whatnot. And I had the big tech, to me, they were okay. We got this wrong, but we're going to correct it going forward. And Big Pharma is not going away. Like, this whole notion that Kennedy is going to come in and destroy Big Pharma. How many people in the United States are on SSIs, Adderall, Ozempic? And if you cut that off, there would be mass suicides and chaos in the United States. And how many kids are on all these things? How many children are on some type of anxiety antidepressants? I don't know what that number is, but I'm also going to go on a limb here and say every parent that uses Ozempic, how many kids of those parents are taking it?
What does Ozempic do?
That's just weight suppression. It was originally designed for diabetes, But now people are taking it. You take it in the form of a shot. I don't know if it's a pill yet, but you take it as a shot, and it kills your appetite. So,
is it
you're
making
losing
people crazy?
you're losing
Yeah.
tremendous amount of weight from it.
It's basically a cancer acquiring substance.
Hmm.
In other words, the stats are indicating that close to 100% of people who go on it for any period of time end up getting cancer.
Well, you get the eyes.
It's
You get the eyes from it too. Like people that take it. If you meet somebody if you see somebody now that's lost a tremendous amount of weight, more than likely they're taking Ozempic, and it's a form of a shot. I want to say it's $100 every time you get one, and now all these med spas are jumping on this, and
yes.
it's so new to the market that you don't know what the fallout or the side effects are going to be. But but people are losing it. They're losing lots of weight from it.
Just to answer your general question, Mike, well, my response, it gels with something that happened last March with regard to Ireland and Donald Trump in the White House when he had, first of all, the Taoiseach, the Prime Minister of Ireland, over and kind of seemed to be taking the mickey out of him, you know. And he mentioned that night a person called Conor McGregor, who then ended up in when people know he's an MMA fighter, they remember him appearing in the White House on St. Patrick's Day, which is a traditional day when the Prime Minister, the Taoiseach of Ireland, is invited. So that was like a very pointed kind of strike at the regime in Dublin. But the other issue, and possibly more important than that, is that Trump was implicitly promising that he was going to withdraw or cause the withdrawal of Big Pharma from Ireland, more or less. Now he didn't say it expressly in those terms, but that was the implication that they would never have been allowed to come to Ireland if he'd been there. That was the way he put it, and that he would have put a stop to it, because of course they're operating on the lowest corporation tax in the world and so on, and they're amounting to like 60% of the Ireland's GDP and so on, and that sounds like, well, of course, that would be a mortal blow to the Irish economy. And yes, it would. But anybody who understands what's happened to Ireland would have to be kind of very, at best, ambivalent about that, because they would recognize that was probably the key reason why the destruction of Ireland got going in the first place. Because the amount of money that was going in, the jobs, the influence of corporations in the culture, and so on, all these factors resulted in the Ireland we now have, which is basically a husk of itself, of what Ireland was and ought to be. And but that then, likewise, as Michael says, nothing has happened here either. Nothing. It just died on the vine. No more discussion of it. Conor McGregor is now still talking about running for the presidency of Ireland, which is going to happen in about 5 weeks' time. So he needs to get his skates on, because he needs to get either 4 county councils, or I think it's 10 members of the parliament, to endorse it, to sign his nomination papers. And there's no indication that he has a single nomination vote yet. But there are lots. The question of Conor McGregor is a big one. I mean, he's a very charismatic guy. He speaks very well. His rhetoric is very, very impressive, and when he talks about Ireland, and there's clear, deep affection he has for Ireland, and but it's unclear whether how good of a president he would be. But what isn't unclear is that the establishment will not, under any circumstances, allow him to get the nomination. I can be almost. I'd nearly bet my house on that, and he's only got a week or 10 days, I think it's to sort that out. But Big Pharma, you see, this is the problem, you see, and a related problem to that, Mike and Michael, is that the medication issue in Ireland is something that you kind of keep forgetting about, as it were. It seems to be like a separate problem over there. So when you're talking about why it is that the Irish people are so quiescent and so kind of indifferent to the fact that their country is being flooded with foreigners, or their children are being killed with vaccines, you think, why aren't they doing something? And then you think, well, probably 2/3 of the population are drugged up to here, so they don't care about anything. that's kind of the terrible situation that we may be dealing with here. That people are so basically medicated that, and that's part of the whole thing. That the medication aspect of this is one that you need to factor in pretty early on in your calculations. You know, if you're not going to waste a lot of time trying to weigh up peripheral factors that really aren't making all that much difference anyway. But this is actually probably a very, very substantial one in the whole experience. And I think this has been much more the case in Ireland than almost anywhere else, precisely for the reason that pharma has such a grip on our country. That you know, maybe it's more, you know, it's more diluted in the culture in other countries, and certainly it seems to be in the United States in general. I would say that the people of the United States in general, I would say, certainly they come across to us as being pretty, you know, awake, pretty, you know, exercised. You couldn't say that about the Irish population in general. And so that's kind of what I see there. But, you know, that so that it seems that this is the thing about Trump that I'm now, I mean, maybe you can call me naive on this, and I'll have to own up to it. But I don't necessarily think naivety is always kind of a bad thing. It probably is if you hold on to it too long. But I certainly now see this whole thing that, you know, these guys, Trump, Vance, Musk, those three, for example, they talk the talk really well. Like they say all the things that we think ought to be said, that we believe in, that we think would make a difference if they were done, but they never do them. And actually, then when you look at the subtext of their whole lifestyle or their professions or their roles in the world, in the like Musk, for example, he's into like chipping brains, and he's into surveillance through satellites, and he's into driverless cars. Well, there's nothing that he and Klaus Schwab would have a lot to talk about, I'm sure, if they ever met. I'm not sure if they did. Maybe they did. You know, so you know, I get no pleasure from saying this, but it does look like that in a certain sense, the one revolution in the world that looked like it might actually have the effect of, you know, inspiring the rest of the world is now actually fraudulent.
Well, and also with that, I mean, you look at you say Elon Musk, but look, Peter Thiel to me is, I mean, I'm using the analogy. He is the new George Soros. People keep referencing George Soros. I don't know. I mean, the guy's 95 years old. How much of how much of an impact is he having anymore? I know his organization. I know his son is very active, but Peter Thiel, Alex Karp. I haven't listened to the Sam Altman Tucker Carlson conversation, but I heard it's quite disturbing. But these are. Oh, God. Sorry, John.
Sorry, just to hold your thought, but I just wanted to add something in there. I don't know. I mean, this is a kind of it almost sounds glib or slightly kind of flippant point, but actually, it nearly knocked me dead when somebody pointed this out to me. Uh, you know, Peter Thiel, who's kind of an obscure figure again, talking about conspiracy theories. You know, the whole idea of like trying to track down where he came from and all that is not that easy, and he just seems to float around the place, going into Yale to pick up J.D. Vance when he was nobody, and getting him a publisher for his book and so on. But you know, there's an anagram for Peter Thiel. Do you know what that is? Have you heard what this anagram?
No.
Do you know it, Michael?
No.
The reptile.
No. I'm sorry, I cut you off. Say it.
The reptile.
Can you expand on that?
Well, how do you end up with an anagram of the reptile of your name? I don't know. I mean, I'm sure like it's okay. It could be a coincidence, but it sounds to you.
Basically rearrange the letters in his name, and you can get reptile.
Yeah, reptile. Yeah, that's what you get. I'm just saying that it seems to me that you know that you can invent. It seems now that part of the thing we have to deal with in the world is that you can invent whole characters, whole personalities, whole biographies, and launch them into the world, and nobody will ever know. And you can create, so you can take the piss, as it were. You know, if you're doing that, pick a name that will be in some way not just a kind of a gaslighting exercise, but actually one that actually does what they're required to do, which is tell people, advertise what they're doing. In other words, that they are required, as I understand, what is it the Masonic or the Satanic code that requires you to say publicly what you're about, and then you can do what you like. You can carry it out. And it seems to me I would have thought that a name like that, it's a strange name in the first place, Peter Thiel. Certainly to Irish ears, anyway. I don't know if it's a very common name in America, but it's a very unusual name. It sounds to me that it might be just a make you up name.
It could. And there's a lot of that stuff out there. A lot. It's hard to
Yeah.
even know where it begins and ends. For instance, the strange 6 million number that keeps getting repeated. The 6 million uh, uh, that died in the Holocaust, but that number was used over and over and over years in advance of World War II. 6 million, where did that come from? It didn't come from World War II. It was being used before World War II. And, that's a six followed by six sixes. And if you take the inverse of that, it's 0.0060 zeros again, 1 6 6 6 6 6. It's like, I don't know. We're talking about people that are into numerology, is what I'm getting to. Tonight over dinner, one of the people at the dinner tonight, he asked me if I had heard about this fortune teller in Burma. And actually, I had come to, because I had written in about 10 years ago a dispatch, which you could find online, called The Fortune Teller of Burma, because I was in some fighting here in Bangkok. I'm in Bangkok now. Back in about 2014, this fortune teller told Thaksin, who's in jail now, that if he doesn't do a certain few things by a certain date, he would never get power back in Thailand again. So anyway, long story short, that fortune teller's fortune, which was publicized before all this happened, he actually lived it out. I mean, it ended up in a big firefight. People got killed. I was present, right? So, what I'm getting to is people do make huge decisions on numerology or astrology or like the fortune teller's name was
Yeah.
ET actually. And the numerology thing, where did that 6 million number come from? That's a sensible question, actually. Six followed by six. We're talking about people that are deeply into numerology to start with. And maybe they're just telling us who they are. Six followed by six sixes, and then you take
Yeah.
the inverse of that, and it's 6 zeros again, and 1 6 6 6, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just
Well, you've reminded me, Michael, that actually I picked this up as well. That and it has been remarked upon that Kash Patel, the head of the FBI, when he was speaking about the investigation into the assassination of Charlie Kirk, said that he stressed and said it several times that the investigation took 33 hours. And
that
he repeated
33
that.
is always popping up, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. So, and here's okay, so there's a double layer, there's two layers to the possibilities of that. One is that it is a literal that he's simply sending some kind of coded whatever Masonic message. The other is that he actually is laying that down to awaken the conspiracy theorists, as it were. I don't like that phrase for all kinds of reasons, but anyway, we know what that means, and it's like breadcrumbs laid out for those guys to get them excited and get them thinking in a certain way and creating more distraction and diversion
But
and
if he is
misdirect them.
doing that, if he is doing that just to confuse us and distract us, then he's behaving as an enemy. He shouldn't be
Yeah.
doing that as an FBI director. He just should not be doing it. If he's doing that, he's behaving as an enemy, right?
Yeah, well, there's some very strange shots of him in that lineup in the press conference where he's lined up with all the other officers and so on, and his eyes are shooting in all directions, and he looks like quite mad, actually, before he starts to speak, and he looks as somebody said that he's like a hostage waiting. Yeah, he's like a hostage waiting. Those videos that the kidnappers send to the families.
Right.
He's waiting for his turn to be filmed. That's kind
Blinking
of the feel.
SOS.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, yeah, exactly that. That's what it is. Yeah, and so like, what does that mean? Like, who's in the room? Like because that's the feeling you get that the people that he's afraid of are right there. They're not like they're watching, and they're whatever it is, he's determined that he's not going to do it.
Yeah, he and Bongino, these were obvious just actors to begin with. And I published on this today on my Substack. Like you never hear this publicly, but I know some of the people in this world. They call them talent. They call people like that talent. And the ones that are bought, they call them properties. They straight up call them properties, right? Like, for instance, Jordan Peterson. He was a talent and a property. He was a property of a Daily Wire. I think he still is, right? I mean, this is normal. There's a huge, like Rogan. He's pushing dope out there. He's a property and he's a talent, right? But you never hear those. Only in behind the scenes, you'll hear them talked about as so and so's a property or a talent, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a common showbiz thing, talent. The talent in
It is
TV.
common showbiz, but actually, when you're talking about people like Bongino, he's a talent and he's a property. He's a straight
Wow.
up property,
Yeah.
right?
There's something very strange about those two guys, Patala and Bongino, the way that they behaved through the whole Epstein saga there some months ago, all that they seem to be kind of caught in the headlights, that they have expressed themselves very strongly in the past on these issues in a way that would lead you to believe that they're going to act very forcibly in a certain direction, and we know what that direction would be. It would be to flush the whole thing out into the public arena. And now they're in the position to do that, we think, it seems. They're suddenly tongue-tied.
Because it's all fraud. That's all it is. I mean, when you go with that paradigm that this is a big movie and we're living it, but people actually die in it, like really die in this stage act. Once you just accept that that's actually what's going on, it's easy to make sense of stuff. If your paradigm is accurate and your input information is accurate and you have a sufficient amount of it, you won't be surprised by things. You won't be surprised with Charlie Kirk. I wasn't surprised at all. Wasn't like that Bongino and Patel. I wasn't surprised. I was saying this in advance. It's obvious. They're just actors, and it's they're just talent. That's all they are, and they are all part of this larger ecosystem that is intentionally destroying the United States. But again, not that Bongino and Patel have the brains or any of that to do this. They're just talent. It's not like Bruce Willis made Hollywood. You know what I mean? Or that Hollywood is the borders of what's going on. That's also a subset, right? This is basically a big, one a senior intelligence person told me years ago. She said, Washington D.C. is Hollywood for ugly people. And she said,
Yeah,
one day you'll understand what I mean.
yeah.
Now I do.
Uh, Michael, just going back to the conversations we had last year, it's very interesting. The way there's been a fairly noticeable shift. I remember after that, like I was kind of accused of being like an extremist for having you even on and talking to you, and of putting about this idea. And it's like as if, as a journalist, one is not allowed to actually invite somebody to talk about whatever they want to talk about. I mean, that used to be the way when I was doing it. But I remember and that was an alternative site which called me an extremist and so on. That was like, immediately afterwards. But then, a few months later, when you have people like David Betts coming out and saying the same thing from an academic point of view, and they're not attacking him as an extremist, it's suddenly like quite plausible. And you get more and more people sort of tuning in to what you're saying, I think. Certainly from Ireland, I think. What have you noticed any escalation in the last, say, year about in how would you describe uh, where we are now compared to where we were then?
Definitely an increased danger. I mean, it's the whole energy system, if we should call it that, is moving in that direction on a global scale. That's why I'm in Bangkok now. I'm not here on vacation, right? This is another one of the battlefields, and Japan is another one. I was just over in Japan again, and from there, before that, I was in Texas looking at it there, right? And before that, Panama, looking at it there. So I mean, this is all part of the same storm system, right? It's not; these are not discrete parts. Ireland is not a discrete, separate issue. It's all the same issue on the same body, and the same players that are ripping apart Ireland are working to rip apart Thailand. These same players, right? And using these same mechanisms. Like for here, now all of a sudden, in the last few years, there's thousands of licenses been issued to sell cannabis. There's cannabis stores all around me now. I mean, all over. I could go to 10 cannabis stores within 6 minutes walk, at least 10, and just within 6 minutes walk, right? And those weren't here 3 years ago, right? So there's been about 10,000 licenses issued in the last 3 years in Thailand for growing, wholesaling, transport, and retailing, right? And so that is one of the weapons that's being unleashed here. They're doing the same in Argentina. Masako and I were down in Argentina late last year and went to a dope expo that was partially put on by the government, right? And Israel is heavily doped up. By the way, a lot of people don't realize that Israel is big time dope, and it has been for a long time. I don't know if people know this, but that's been a hub for drug trade since before Israel was even born. That just happens to be where drugs kind of crisscross right there. So, you naturally going to get hit with them.
What happened to Japan, Michael? I mean, Japan was kind of well known for having resisted inward migration for many, many decades, and to have kept its integrity, total integrity as a homogeneous population. Is it now? Has that stopped? Is it what caused Japan to come under attack?
Information war, and again, it's the same players. IOM is over there, HIAS, right? All the same players. United Nations has a huge office downtown, like a skyscraper. Actually, we've been to it. And but the information war, of course, information war is the most significant weapon in this that we're all facing is information war. That's what we've been talking about the whole conversation is information war. And,
yes.
and when it comes to information war, the grease of information war is intoxicants, whether that be alcohol, cannabis, opium, whatever, right? It's cocaine, it's intoxicants. That's the grease, that's the fuel. And another huge component is music, right? Music and intoxicants, those can make, that's like atomic bomb level stuff when it comes to information war. And those have been unleashed now for generations, and they've had severe effects, right? If you want to destroy a country, of course, you're going to unleash intoxicants on them. And go ahead.
No, sorry, just talk to me about the music aspect, because that's I kind of understand the point, but in the context of drugs and rock and roll going together. But the music on its own, though, does that have a harmful effect also?
It can, in a big way, especially when weaponized. And music is highly weaponized, right? And a lot of people have come to me over the years, bizarrely, and asked me about depression stuff, because a lot of people see that I have a pretty steady personality and I don't get depressed, right? It's just like, I don't know what depression is. Since many, many years, I've never been depressed. But every once in a while, I'll feel a spark of depression when I'll hear a certain few songs. Like last year, I heard one when I was with Masako at dinner. It reminded me of when my mother died when I was a child, right? And it was the music. It only took like 5 seconds of that. And I remembered that song from when I was a child. And every time I hear it, it's only every few years I hear it. And, what I'm getting to is when people have come to me and asked me about, hey, or they're saying they don't feel bad. First thing I want to look at is what you're listening to on your music, right? Elton John, all the sad music. Sorry, gotta go. All gotta go. Country music where people are all drunk all the time, meeting in the bar, gotta go, right? I love country music, but the fact is, any music that's depressing or that makes you want to go kill cops, gotta go, right? You know what I mean? And just go to like Beethoven, you know what I mean? You can listen to that all day long and not want to kill somebody or jump off a bridge. And so all intoxicants, no sad music or crazy music. No, you got to get your sleep. You got to get your sleep and get some sunshine and go for walks. And that's about it. If you can just do these things, no sad music, no intoxicants, go for walks in the sunshine and get your sleep, I'll guarantee you 99% of the people aren't going to have any depression left. You know what I mean? It's just like right out the window.
Yeah, so that's a very interesting thing, Michael, because I mean, I'm a big music fan, but I'm also kind of aware of those associations. And I remember actually a few years ago, as an experiment, I went underwent a kind of with a friend of mine who was a psychiatrist. He brought people into a church, and he did this kind of thing of taking them back to their previous lives and all this stuff. I
Right.
didn't believe in it. I didn't believe it at all. Like, but one of the devices he used was he had spliced all kinds of music together so that you had your Beethoven, love beautiful swirling kind of music, and then
Yeah.
drums, and so you'd be kind of thrown from one mood to another. And this was one of the devices to bring you
Mess
back.
you up.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's very analogous to what we were talking at the very beginning there, where they're trying to do with this kind of fragmentation of narrative. That there's so many different perceptions and different that you don't know. It's like almost like a Picasso, be living in a Picasso painting. You
Yeah.
don't know what's reality.
That's a good way to put it. I would like to listen to the music that he put. Do you know him still? I'd like to talk with him. That sounds interesting.
No, he died unfortunately
Oh,
there last year. Yeah, Ivor Brown is his name. He's a very brilliant man,
right.
and he also used what do you call that drug, the horse tranquilizer, not mescaline. It's a I forget now. But he went for certain people, and I didn't really want to take that, but I did actually take a shot of it just because he kept saying because I burst into tears, Michael, straight off. Like literally within minutes, I couldn't stop crying for an hour and a half, and then the following day, he gave me a shot of this, and I went the other way completely. Started laughing. I was like I was in a big bar. I was talking to the guy down the far side of the church. I could hear him as clear as day, as if he was sitting beside me, and we were just laughing, and like it was quite surreal. And there was a guy beside me in the bed, and he was screaming. He got up and he says, can a man not die in peace here, And another woman kind of came rushing up to try and kill her father because she thought I was her father because I was using the line out of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Yeah, there's Ratchet. I want my fucking cigarettes. And she came running up thinking I was ordered because her father used to send her to he was abusing her, but he used to send her for cigarettes. And it's all this stuff. It's surreal stuff in a way, but I didn't believe in it. But I came away thinking, whoa, this is heavy shit. Like, I mean, this is
Yeah.
not. This is something that there's something going on here that is real that you can actually go into these places in yourself and out into the stratosphere as well, because you would feel that as well with these kind of musical things, in that sense of because it's what you call deep abdominal breathing. That's one of the techniques as well, which is a very dangerous thing. Actually, I realize you can actually do it to yourself, like literally within a couple of minutes on if you just lie on the ground, and you will actually create an altered state with it. So all these things in combination. I didn't. I only done this kind of thing. This is the only time, and I never did any LSD or cannabis or anything. But it showed me with the potential of drugs to kind of, take you into strange places, which may or
And
may
leave
not.
you there. And
Yeah,
leave you
yeah,
there.
and leave it
Yeah.
there. And places which may or may not be real in any kind of
Yeah.
historical sense. You
Right.
don't know. You've no way of knowing because your dream life is in there as well, isn't it? And anything, it's your dream life. We know is capable of anything. Like you can, there's nothing that isn't possible in there.
You know what? I'll tell you a trick for becoming smarter very quickly. Go for long walks. I learned this by accident because I used to walk in the Himalaya a lot. And because there's a lot of stuff in your mind, like you're brilliant. Like I've read so, I mean, but I'll guarantee if you go for a long walk, like a couple weeks, I don't mean a couple hours. I'm talking about like 2, 3 weeks, a month. You go for these long walks because there's a lot that's in your mind that you haven't had a chance to honestly sort out. But when you go for these long walks and you're not no distractions. It's just the birds and the mountains, and you're getting hungry, and you go a little further and you stop and have some tea. You have a time to sort these boxes out and make connections that you don't normally make when we have all these distractions. That's why I've done quite a lot of long walks. And every time when I'm finished with a long walk, I'm like, man, there's things I see now that I never saw before because I just took time to, clean up the mess and stack the papers in the right places. I'm telling
Hmm.
you, it works. I just discovered it by accident just because I walked a lot in the mountains. I'm talking myself into it. I want to go do it tomorrow. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah, well, yeah. I used to walk a lot, but I had a kind of a viral attack about 6, 7 years ago, which really damaged my my balance and everything. So I find I get very tired after about, I used to be able to do 20, 30,000 steps a day. I have one of those stepometers, which I shouldn't have, but I only use it for that. And I'm now down to 40,000 a week as opposed to which maybe 150,000, But I loved walking, yeah. But I think also driving long distances can achieve something similar, I think. I found that I drove a van for a long time, and I found that actually just on your own, particularly in the early morning, driving and no interruptions, very little traffic, nobody around, you could really kind of go into lots of strange crevices in yourself and sort of sort things out and come up with some really good ideas, I think, as well. I mean,
quiet. You need that quiet, the quiet
yeah,
to sort stuff out and just
yeah,
like,
yeah. I kind of think that actually writing, creative writing, or journalism, even and all that is actually long distance driving actually go very well together. I mean,
writing is very good. Writing is very good. I don't know what it is about writing, but writing is another way to pull
yeah.
intelligence out of yourself that you didn't have before you did the writing.
Oh, very often, yeah. I mean, I can start off to write something, and I end up writing something I didn't even know I knew.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's astonishing. But to go back to the war, Michael. You know, as you know, Ireland, as you say, it's in a pretty bad shape. We have a situation now where our leaders are treating the people with such contempt and gaslighting them in such an extent. We have the guy who is, the leader of our government, Prime Minister Taoiseach, we call him Taoiseach, which means chieftain. God help us. He attacks the people all the time. He tells them that they've got to let go of this old-fashioned notions of sovereignty, or their narrow nationalism. Or he told us that the Irish were never a homogenous people, which is actually a lie, because not alone were we, but we are. The science shows that we're still almost like, apart from a couple of like dilutions from the Vikings, the Normans, we're kind of 100% Gaelic. Irish, Celtic.
You're straight up indigenous people.
Yeah.
Like
And then the most recent one now, he's telling us that the idea that Ireland is for the Irish, Ireland belongs to the Irish, is a very reactionary and retrograde idea. I would have thought it's an obvious idea because, first of all, it's in the proclamation of 1916, read on the steps of the GPO by Pádraig Pearse, as part of the revolution that occurred at Easter in that year. And it's obvious. Like if the Irish people don't own Ireland, well, who the hell does? Well, now it's beginning to emerge that actually the debts which Ireland accrued in the period of the Celtic Tiger, which were driven by corrupt politicians, have ended up in the hands of the clients of BlackRock, etc. And those guys are actually, gather, under the impression that they can come to Ireland, knock on the door, and say, "When are we going to get vacant possession?"
When were those deaths? That's old. That's old stuff.
Oh
Right?
yeah, but they've been hanging around for a long time. But you see, these guys, these have been on the market for a long time. These bonds and so on. I believe I've been told actually that a lot of these chits might have ended up in the Middle East, places like that, which
But
could have
how
another.
old is that debt?
Oh, 15 years.
I thought it was much older than that.
No, it really kind of landed in the wake of 2010 when
Right.
the Troika arrived in Ireland, basically to accept the surrender of the Irish economy and the Irish sovereignty concerning its own economy, because the Troika was representatives of the European Commission, the IMF, and the World Bank. And they basically came in and then they cut. Then, you see, I believe what happened then was that there was a kind of a coup in Ireland. I call it an auto colpe assistido, which means an assisted self coup. It's a French phrase that it's not quite a coup in the normal sense. It's not a color revolution in the normal sense. It's like an agreed arrangement of the country's future, whereby the government becomes simply an administrative body that carries out instructions which are coming from outside. And I believe that the Clinton Foundation, the American deep state, probably MI6, the City of London, all of these forces were at play here. And essentially Ireland was recolonized. And you can see the traces of that in 2011. There was an election in February. I mean, the government that got elected there was appalling. Like, it was like this, the people of Ireland would have been, you would have thought, ready to kind of march on government buildings. And they were in late 2020 when the Troika was here. But then there was all kinds of talk about starting movements to take out the old system, to take out the old parties, the big beasts, Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, who had really done this between them. And so everybody was talking, we need a new party, we need a new party. And then a new party arrived. It was called Democracy Now! And everybody said, okay, well, that's great. It was two journalists in charge who were running it. Everybody said, well, okay, we don't always agree with those guys about everything, but they're decent, straight guys, as, Tony Blair's famous phrase, pretty straight guys, which is a slightly loaded phrase, but probably accurate here. And the next thing, the election was pulled back from summer, May maybe, or June, to February. And it was announced in January. And suddenly, the leader of these guys says, oh, too bad. We don't have enough time. We can't get our act together in time to run the election. The result was that they basically allowed the biggest party in the country to sweep back into power in a coalition. And since then, Michael, even though we've had elections in 2016 and 2020 and in 2024, it's essentially the same government. Right. And they're doing the same things. So there's been a total coup in that sense. In any meaningful sense, it was a coup. And there were all kinds of odd events that happened that year as well. Like in May, there was in 1 week in May, there were 2 state visits to Ireland. One was Queen Elizabeth of England, and the other was Obama. And they didn't come together. There was a day between the 2 visits, but they were all televised and on the radio. And I was listening on the radio, and the theme of the Elizabeth one was, oh, we need to put our history behind us. Our history now is a shared history. And all this sort of stuff. And then the Obama vibe was quite different. It was like, let's look to the future. This man represents our future. So there's something very profound happened that nobody knew about. I didn't sort of look at this. It was only in retrospect in the last couple of years I started to look at this and see that we were being basically captured and trussed up for some future, divvy up.
Oh, clearly. But gentlemen, I have to go because it's after midnight and I have a very early meeting here in Bangkok. And I hope we can talk again soon.
Sure thing, Michael. Yeah.
Definitely. Michael, even though you were just on here, where could people find you?
I'm on Substack. I just put up something today, actually, about the Charlie Kirk thing. Whatever is happening, it is a thing. Obviously, it's more than just Charlie Kirk. It's the much bigger. But I just put something on Substack. Just look up Big Honey. I made it simple. Look up Big Honey on Substack, and you can find it.
John?
Well, I'm on Substack, johnwaters.substack.com. And I'm somewhere else as well. I sometimes do some videos I've done, interviews on the scholar gypsies. And I've got my book out. It's The Abolition of Reality, first draft of the End of History. And that's kind of available on, well, hate to say it, but Amazon are doing a good deal with delivery and so on. And so that's kind of it. I'm on Twitter, but just ignore that because it was a mistake. And I haven't actually got around to taking it down. I don't even know how to. So it's just up there, but nothing's happening there. So it's like there's tumbleweed all over the place, hopefully.
Guys, thank you so much for doing this, and look forward to our next conversation.
Thanks, gentlemen.
Likewise.
Mic drop.
Good night.
Thank you.